it seems like, your skill set in like growth and resiliency has been a big part of your journey as well. At multiple points in the story, you started almost at the ground level, and then you were part of
Almost
this
below the ground
massive,
level. Yeah.
yeah, massive growth. So, and over again, right? And
Mhm.
so tell us a little bit about what that's like. It must come with a bunch of challenges, but also it must be very rewarding.
Yeah, I think there's a self-sufficiency piece to it that drives me as an individual. I like the ability to say, hey, I kind of created myself. I use every resource that I've always had. I mean, I'm an only child brought up by a single mother. That's my background. I think so highly of my mom because she created this life that really propelled me into whatever I was able to do going forward. She paid for my college. This was based on her going out there and being in pharmaceutical sales and doing exactly what needed to be done to create a lifestyle for she and I. And that got me started. But throughout my path, I've taken all the life lessons from her and people that were around me that supported me, and I've had my share of failures. There have been projects that I've taken on that just didn't work. There have been situations that I've gotten myself into where not only have I been the beneficiary of something pretty negative, but the people that were with me were also a beneficiary of that negative impact. So it's kind of the way of it. When you're out there taking risks, not everything works. Hopefully, over time, most of the things that you're working on do tend to be positive, but along the way, you're going to hit some real bumps. In my case, I tell people all the time, I've had to recreate myself at least 3 times. I'm turning 50 this year. You don't live 50 years and with everything being positive. It's impossible. So I've had to recreate myself. I've had to dig myself out of a couple holes. And luckily, I've had good people around me that always supported me. And I think I've made some pretty smart moves over time. But the net, it's pretty good. It's pretty positive. I lead a pretty nice life. I've got great people. My kids, they still love me. Great. There's money in the bank. So overall, it's been positive. But for sure, I've had to recreate myself.
What did your mom teach you about money and finances and success and real estate, if at all? What were some of those
My
lessons
mom.
you remember? Yeah.
So I can tell you some of her background. A 6 foot tall woman from small town Indiana, married a New York guy who was an artist, composer that had no concept of, or no real desire to focus on money. It was all about the art of creation. Brilliant man, but business was not his forte. He lived the other side of life. So she created this lifestyle for herself that was out of the norm. We ended up across the big pond in Paris for a number of years. And by the way, that was my first language. It's been a long time since then, but we started life there, then eventually moved out to California, and then moved back to the Midwest. In that move back to the Midwest, my mom had to recreate herself. She got into sales. She managed to get into, at first she was selling seminars. So imagine like going to a company and saying, hey, bring your 15 best employees and we'll do a seminar on how to make their life better. She was selling those seminars. She had no sales background, but she jumped into that. Full commission sales. And so she'd be traveling all week. And during the week, I was living with my grandparents, her mom and dad, in very small town Indiana, a town of 300 people, very different than Chicago. But it worked. And then slowly she excelled, and then eventually moved into pharmaceutical sales, where life completely changed. That sales background that she got selling seminars allowed her to take that huge next step. I watched this whole evolution happen from this small town in Indiana, where she went from driving a Honda Civic that she could barely afford, to then all of a sudden having a company car, to then having money in the bank, to having a 401k, to being able to pay for my college eventually, to being able to buy me all the little things that kids always want and desire. She was able to do all of it. A single mother that had no resources, she did it. So that's always been my inspiration. If she could do it, I sure as heck could. So I have every opportunity in front of me, and I just have to make sure to grasp it and take it. But she's been a huge inspiration for me my entire life. she still continues today.
I want to go back to something that you talked about earlier, because I'm pretty sure a lot of our listeners may have followed a similar trajectory along their investment career or timeline, I guess you can say, is you had mentioned that you got into investing alongside the company that you were working with, but that you also started buying condos and you were self-managing them, right? Mm-hmm. And I know, Annie, I don't know, did you ever self-manage any of your rentals, or did you?
We did. Yeah, we did. Right. Not for long, but we did.
So
the worst phone call you can get is when somebody calls you up and says, "Hey, the light bulb's out on the front porch."
Oh yeah.
Really? Great.
We had one guy call us, and he was like, he was drunk, and he's like, "I'm locked out of my condo," and I'm like, seriously, dude, like, you're gonna call us because you got like, call a locksmith, don't call us, you know.
Exactly.
But yeah, we had a nice arrangement. I was the leasing person, and then my husband was the handyman, so that was like how we did it for 7 years. It was the worst torture ever. But I want you to give us some insight into that, because I think there's a lot of people out there who may be listening, and they may be considering buying, you know, single family homes or duplexes or smaller rental properties, and not get into syndications because maybe they think that there's more money in rental properties. But then it becomes a question of time or money, and what do you have more of? And, you know, I was just thinking about this morning. I'm going through evictions on 2 of my properties right now. Like, it is no fun. On like, it's the 80-20 thing, right? It's like I'm spending 80% of my time dealing with emails about, like, you know, the tenant and moving in and moving out, on like the 20% or less of like the money that's coming in. It's like the pits, you know? So talk to us about that. What was that experience like? How many condos did you own? How long did you manage them? What were the headaches? Tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah, so I'll tell you that the way I bumped into it was not with a conscious effort to get into condo ownership. It went from my wife and I had bought our first condo, then we started having kids, so we bought the neighbor condo, then we needed a nanny, so we bought another condo, and then another, and then you upgrade to a house or another place down the street, and then you buy another place, and before you know it, you've got 5, 6, 10 different condos that you're paying mortgages on and you're hoping to lease out. And that's exactly what happened with us. So it wasn't huge. We had, I think there were 7 units at one point, these condo units. But the tough part is, in that world, I had myself convinced, I had no background in investment real estate at that point, but I had myself convinced that the equity that I'm going to have by owning all these units, and the cash flow that I'm going to have but from the rental stream and this and that, was going to be so great. The reality was that the time and effort that went into just managing those few condos was ridiculous. I was constantly going back to those buildings, and luckily they were all in one building, so I was able to kind of encapsulate that in. But I was constantly going there, dealing with management, dealing with the tenants, chasing people down for their rent, the whole thing, and it just became overwhelming. And the reality was, I didn't make that much money on it. Condos, when you're buying them individually, they have these things called HOA fees, and assessments and all kinds of things. And, you know, I tried to stay on the board with the condo building, but at the end of the day, you just couldn't manage around the fees, and I couldn't charge high enough rent to truly take care of everything. So at the end of the day, you know, I had some write-offs. I had a little bit of cash flow. I had some growth in equity over time, but it wasn't great. And once I finally sold everything, I looked at the total picture of it and said, this was not a great venture. It was a ton of work, and I really didn't make that much money. I can actually see cash flow without doing any work.
While you sleep. Yes.
Yeah, and I had myself convinced that the only way that I could truly maximize my profits is if I was doing the work myself. Yep, and for a while, I was fully convinced of it. I said, you know, it's painful, but I just need to work through it, and eventually it's going to work out. And it didn't. And so the happiest day was when I finally sold my last condo unit and said, I'm done. I'm walking away from it.
Yeah.
But by that point, I had my other investments that were going, and the cash flow is fantastic.